confronting authors with real questions about the writing process, the difficult and disheartening publishing industry, and why anyone would choose to torture themselves in the world of writing. This is the Literally Podcast with your host, writer, runner, and the literary voice of Ogden, Utah, Case Johnston. Exposing literature, the authors, the business, the process. The Literally Podcast. All right, thank you for listening to this podcast. This episode of Literally is sponsored by Lexicon and Line. Case, tell us a little something about Lexicon and Line.
Lexicon and Line, it does three things. They are communications consultants. They teach professional business writing and speaking courses, and they are research and data evaluation experts.
And you can find everything about Lexicon and Line at lexicononline.com. Please give them a visit, and thank you so much for sponsoring this podcast, Lexicon and Line.
Espido Freire is a young, prolific writer whose fictional and non-fictional work has had a major reception, both by the public and critics. She is one of the most promising writers of Hispanic narrative. She was born in Bilbao on July 16, 1974. After spending some years studying early music studies, she graduated with a degree in English literature from the University of Deusto, where she also completed a master's degree in editing. While at the University of Deusto, she founded 2 creative writing journals. She is still involved with University of Deusto's cultural affairs. She published her first novel, Irlanda, when she was only 23 years old. The novel received the Mil Page Award in 1999. She published her second novel in 1999, Donde Siempre es Octubre, immediately followed by Melocotones Hallados, for which she won the Planeta Prize, the best-known literary award in Spain. At that point, she was only 25 years old, which meant she had become the youngest novelist awarded with the Planeta. A year later, she received the Que Leer Award for Melocotones Hallados, given by the readers to the best Spanish novel. Since then, she has dabbled into other genres such as short story essays, young adult literature, and poetry, and has never disappointed the critics. As an essayist, she has published When Eating is Hell, a research work on young women dealing with bulimia, a disease she suffered when she was young. For a comprehensive list of her work, visit the official website. She also writes for newspapers and magazines and works as a freelance literary translator. Critics view her as one of the fresher and most interesting voices in the Spanish literary field, and the excellent reviews on her first novel have been repeated more than once. Her work has been translated to English, French, German, Portuguese, Turkish, Polish, Italian, Greek, and Serbian. She is interested in creative writing and teaches writing workshops at different universities and cultural institutions. She has opened her own school of creative writing, E+F, in Madrid. This is Case Johnston. This is the Literally Podcast. And today we have a very special guest brought to us by the Hurst Artist Scholar-in-Residence program at Weber State University. We are currently on the campus of Weber State University talking with Espido Freire. Today Espido will read some of her work for us, and then we'll talk about what she had to say today in the keynote. If you were lucky enough to be up here, and if you were not, we can delve into many of the subjects of fiction and creative nonfiction, and where writers belong in the world and our responsibility to our readers. Around the table, we were going to introduce ourselves, starting with Isabel.
Okay, thank you. I'm Isabel Asensio. I'm professor of Spanish at Weber State University. Of my areas of teaching expertise are women's literature and translation and interpreting studies.
Okay, my name is Electra Gamon Fielding. I'm an associate professor of Spanish here at Weber State University. And my areas of expertise are Spanish literature, early modern, 16th, 17th century, and medieval. And I also teach medical Spanish.
Thank you. From here, let's hear you read. And if you want to give us any background on what you're going to do, please do. Yeah.
The book we decided that I should be reading today is called Evil Short Stories, Evil Tales. And it compilates 99 short, very, very short stories that go from water to angels to voices to fairy tales, and that I hope, make the reader to question a little bit about good and evil, and also offer a different vision about the stories that we've heard many, many times. And I will start with one that I think that Isabel likes a lot. I will be reading in Spanish. The title of this short story is Angels, Ángeles, and it says like that. De pronto se giró porque creía escuchar pasos tras él. La calle solitaria estaba desierta. De nuevo se volvió. Nadie. Sintió miedo. Apretó el paso. Entonces le golpearon en la cabeza, cayó al suelo y antes de morir vio cómo el humano al que debía custodiar le arrancaba las alas estremecidas. And this one, belonging to the fairy tales, has no title, and it says: Durante 13 años durmió en la misma cama y se despertó dolorida y molesta cada mañana, pero la reina parecía tan estricta que no se atrevió a quejarse. Cuando murió, la vieja reina escamoteó el guisante y promulgó ostentosamente que aquella mujer no era una princesa. This short story tells about the Princess and the Pea. I think that you know that story, don't you? And this one could be another princess. El día había sido caluroso y ella tenía los pies hinchados. Dolorosa e impotente, vio cómo el príncipe dejaba la casa y se desposaba con una criada llena de mugre. Demasiado tarde recordó el otro zapatito que aún guardaba y del cual no volvió a hablar jamás. And the last one. Ahora tú serás la más hermosa, dijo el espejo. Ella estaba al fin segura de haberla matado con la manzana. De pronto se sintió sola y vacía. Presa de una infinita nostalgia, cogió un pequeño retrato de su hijastra y lloró amargamente toda la tarde.
I'm so glad we did that in Spanish. Yeah,
good call.
And they're nice and short. Is this collection available in English?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have to check it because it's been translated into French, Italian, but English I'm not that sure.
Okay. Either way, you should order it if you're listening. It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, and we do have a lot of, within this community, Spanish-speaking, Spanish-reading listeners. And so if you are a Spanish-speaking, Spanish-reading listener, you should pick it up, and we will list all of Espido's bibliography along with the podcast as well. So today, when Isabel gave us the opportunity to sit down and have a discussion with you, and then forwarded us your bio, and then when I started to do other research, I have to admit that and it is our goal with this podcast to get bigger authors, to get authors as prolific and as well known as yourself. And so I have to admit, I was a little bit intimidated. I mean, looking at it, and we've had authors from all over the country, but at the same time, I'm looking at your history. And so that's why I really wanted to go and listen to the keynote speech today and to kind of get that introduction.
And then you stop being intimidated
right now. I felt more comfortable because I'm still intimidated. Let's clear that up, everybody. I felt more comfortable because the subject matters which were covered within the keynote, surprisingly to me, because I think we do, as authors and as readers and as scholars, feel as if Europe is so far away and we're looking at things differently, or South America is far away, or Africa or East Asia or whatever it might be. We must be looking at the world differently, or looking at literature differently, or looking at the process of writing differently. And as you talked today, and as you fielded questions, I found immediately that we are dealing with the same things. I mean, it's so universal, and it was extremely calming, at the same time reassuring, and I felt like we could come here this afternoon and talk, and we are talking the same language, in the sense that when it comes to creative writing and it comes to story creation, and the reason for it all, we're on the same page. And so that was a great keynote today. We have the same challenges, same dreams, and the same kind of goals when it comes to what we're doing for readers. And so my first question today, which came from a lot of the heart of what we discussed, or what you discussed today, and that what we discuss a lot as writers, and this is, what is our responsibility? And that responsibility changes and shifts between fiction and nonfiction. I mean, they both have a high level of responsibility, and I know that most of the people who are listening to this weren't able to be on campus today. So I would love it if you were to expand on that responsibility in both fiction and nonfiction, and how you view it as weighty as an author.
Well, regarding to the things that we have in common in Europe and America, I think that we have a lot, but also we can discuss the differences, no? Because of course there are national differences, there are cultural differences, and there are perceptions that are quite different. But I thought that being in front of an audience that was mostly American, we should try to look for the link that is connecting us. Regarding to your question now, I think that any author can choose what kind of responsibility wants to have and to maintain during her or his career towards their readers. Because of course you can elude, you can reject any responsibility if you want, but I don't think that this takes you very, very far in a career, and also being a public figure. And in my case, I was exposed to the public audience since the very first novel. So I took a very early awareness about what should I say if I wanted to be coherent. I could play the fool if I wanted, or I could be provocative, but that doesn't go with my character first. And then if I was betting on the long way, things should be serious. And by serious, I mean that we should talk about things that really matters. And the things that really matters are pain, darkness, doubts, experiences, crises, processes, and that makes you feel, as you said, quite comfortable when you arrive too, because no matter the century or no matter the language, you can feel yourself reflected into that. Literature can be a mirror along the way, as Stendhal said, or can be also a window, but it can also be a mixture. You can sometimes be your reflection in the window. And that's what I like to do with my readers, that they can feel that I have a world my own, but also that they can be included into that world, and then make that emotional journey together if they want. If they want to do it alone, they just can construct something from my text. This is the ideal. Then we come to reality, and maybe we lose everything. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yes, absolutely. And I really am intrigued by what you said with, you could just discard it. You, as a writer, you could just say, I don't care about my responsibility to my reader. To me, that feels, it feels irresponsible.
Yeah, and coward, but you can do it if you want.
Sure, absolutely. I do think there are writers out there that might do that, and I don't think about those writers when I think about writers.
Yeah, it's the same with me.
I think about the writers who care.
But reality is that readers do. Most readers don't distinguish between one and them, because what they perceive is the story, and the story sometimes, no matter how deep it is, it's taken in consideration as far as it connects with the public, with the audience, with the reader, with the curious people around. No, I spend a lot of my time in the lessons of creative writing with students saying "or not," no, because they are full of misconceptions about literature and about readers and about the creative process. So when they say "but you should do" or "you must do," I say "or not." Come on, this is creativity. You can explore and you can project your own idea, always taking in account that every idea, we must respect all the ideas, but not all of them are creatively valid. And that is a dictation of aesthetics and quality over market and taste, personal taste. But, well, it's my dictation, so what can I do?
Absolutely. That answered my question really, really well. I have about 1,000 that stem off from that, but but do you guys have anything at the moment?
I do. Actually, tying again with your keynote speech today, you were talking about how we consume literature differently now, right? Like it has traditionally been, well, always has been a very solitary activity, and now it seems like we are living in a time that there's a lot of interruptions, and it's like you need to read it quickly, right? I think probably we have gotten used to, these short things that we read probably online and stuff like that. And then there was also a little bit of a conversation about how difficult it is to convince students that there is value, right, in reading literature. Do you have any advice for us who are, right, especially Isabel and I, who are trying to at least teach literature in class? It's difficult to get students engaged. It's especially difficult when you're teaching in Spanish, right?
And
women.
And women.
Literature. I had to cancel my class.
Really?
Because I only had, very low enrollment, 5 students or so.
Okay.
How did they define it as women's literature?
Works written by women. Poetry written by women. It was, when I give the title "Women's Hispanic Women's Literature," I mean that the authors are women.
And that was the only criteria, and
yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's strange to me and sad, because one would say that nowadays the feminine, the women's voice is getting more attention, but
Attention by who?
Yeah, attention by media most of the times. That's true. Electra was commenting on 2 terms that I used at the conference. One was time. To read and to write, you need time, and you need more time for thinking than for writing most of the occasions. And solitude, that is something that I value a lot, but that is at the same time scary and necessary. And I think that when we approach to literature being readers, not being teachers or being writers or being whatever, critics maybe, the normal reader, the average reader, normal is such an ugly word, is expecting to get something in exchange, because it's giving something that is very valued, time, and in a way part of their loneliness. And a good reader with a good book, they're a very strong couple. They create a very strong link, and usually it starts from them. From there, it starts a tiny little bit addiction. Once you've persuaded a child to open a book, and once you've got him to read something that really connects with him, it's probably a way that he will or she will walk along his or her whole life. But getting that is really difficult when you're in your 20s and your focus, or 30s, and you're focused on productivity, on being productive, on getting money or surviving. We have that old belief that literature is good for nothing, and that's not true actually. Maybe, well, literature and language, although language is perceived like something more productive and more profitable, but this is not true on the long term or on the middle term, because the way that you the ways that you are learning, the meanings that you are getting from life, the new gates that you are opening with literature, they are extremely useful for many other fields that will require creativity and that will require patience and divergent. Is that in English the word? Divergent? Divergente?
Yeah, divergent.
Divergent way of thinking. And this is this is extremely high, extremely expensive to get today. When you are, I start again because this is, my thoughts are going around like birds. What I mean is, once you learn that literature is opening new gates for you and it's teaching you different ways of thinking, you get into a divergent way of moving around life. And in many aspects, that will make you very valuable. That would make you unique. And let's face it, in a world that is so homogeneous and that everyone is so similar to the next one, that way of thinking will make you an exception. I've been teaching engineers, lawyers, doctors, and all of them are looking for something different when they are reading and when they are learning how to write. They are looking for a difference, a way of dealing with problems, a way of dealing with the big topics like death and pain and love. And that, of course, you can get it from philosophy and from experience and from psychology, but mainly from literature. But to get convinced by that, you have to be betting on the long term. And sometimes at the university, they don't have the guts.
So I'm active in the in an entrepreneurial space, a small business space, and we hear all the time, like, why is this person so successful? And I'm just thinking of ways to get the students to be in. Well, I have an English degree from here, so thank you, Weber. In more involved in literature, and it feels like a lot of the very successful entrepreneurs read a lot. And so but they're not just reading business books. You can learn leadership from the classics. You can learn a sense of adventure and a sense of the ability to take the next step in life through, classic literature. And you learn these things that they just become a toolbox for making choices later in life. And it just gives you this breadth as a person rather than just hearing stories or learning about an author. It's not as surfacey as that. It goes really deep, and it makes it's hard to get students to understand that. Like when you said they're very short term, it's like, well, the football game is in an hour. I gotta. Why should I be thinking about my future necessarily? But
yeah, sometimes it's not that superficial. I want to believe. Sometimes it's just that they are in love or that they are working at the same time. And when you are young, you are greedy with your time. It's like life is ending at 27. No, like any famous singer. So. I think it's very difficult to really slow down and think that it's not only the next day, it's the next year, it's the next decade. When I started publishing, not writing, I came from another career. I used to be a singer, an opera singer, prodigy child, things like that. And it was very hard for me to survive that process. It cost me an illness. The bulimia that we've talked about. But something I learned from that process was that I should think not only for today, but only for what I wanted to be in 10 or 15 years. Because careers can change, but in Spain, for instance, they are quite stable. If you start in one field, most probably is that you will die doing exactly the same thing in the same field. So if I like it was my case, if I wanted to keep an open mind, I had to take as a support something that was very broad, and that was literature, that was knowledge in the classic way. I think that if, of course, you're right, literature gives you something deeper than the today, than the urgency of doing something right now, but it's much more. It's also builds your mind with new vocabulary and with new concepts. I said at the conference that you can solve problems that are only in your abstract field, but that they will become real. You can feel the loss of somebody very dear much before that happens. You can live, of course, different lives. That is like a cliche, but you can transform into different person, into different people, and during your life you will become different people. So it's not only a self-help tool; it's much more. And I am supposed to be quite successful in this. I'm not talking out of. I'm talking because my experience is that. I'm not trying to convince anybody. And now an angel passed.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel that I have to convince people of what I do, that I have to explain myself and justify myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself reducing the amount of reading that I ask my students to do.
Yeah.
I end up doing short stories more than novels, because if I ask them to read 3 novels in a semester, they will make faces. Like, are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
When am I going to read that?
Do you think that this is because they don't have time, or because their priorities are not in reading, are not focused on reading? Because time is the same for everyone.
Yes, yeah, I think it's their priority.
Yeah,
because you can make time.
Something I say, and it caused quite an impression on people, is that I read almost 1 book a day, around 300, yeah, 300 every year. It's not exactly 1 every day, but because this is part of my job, and also because I love it, and also because it's part of my daily habit. I have a routine, and that routine has to do with comparing and looking for and chasing new stories, and I have the time for it. And of course, I have to choose between doing some things and not doing some other things. But if you're a student, your priority should be focus on what you should do, and this is their time for developing a good knowledge of language, history, literature, and whatever they want. They should read. If they don't have that clear, they are making a big mistake. Also, I know it's different when you are a teacher and you are every day saying the same and trying to convince them, that when you are a writer and they approach you with a complete different point of view. No, they want the secret, and you have to say that the secret is being given by the teachers day by day at the classroom. No, they want a short way. It's like, how did you do it? No, there's no way of accelerating a process. You have to go through. No.
Yeah, and you see that, and it's that want to skip ahead. I teach graduate students in creative writing, and they have the first chapter done of their book. And the first question they ask is, how do I get it published? And your thoughts are, this is so far ahead of where we are. We don't want to be thinking about this, because if they're thinking that, what are they doing to their writing if they're thinking about the publishing side of it? I mean, if they're writing, that's changing their entire book. When you think, if they're thinking about publishing before they're done with the thing in which they're living and breathing and writing every single day, it changes every word. In my mind, I think it would change every word because of intent, because their intent should be to tell the best story right now, but they write a page and they think, how do you get that published? What's the next step? And that's like, that's so far.
And only if we know what we should write in order to be published, because there's not a magic formula. When I'm teaching creative writing, I usually confront them with reality, and reality is numbers, and is the difficult way to publish, and is, once you've published, how difficult it is to be visible and be read and keep a career, no? And surprisingly enough, they don't want to hear it. They want to talk about their literature, they want to talk about process, they want to blah, 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 no? Be in a group and feeling part of the group. But then when you say yes, but you need an strategy, and you have to be clever, and that can't make an influence on what you are writing. And you can hear the crack, it's like... And but I think that this is being honest with your students.
This isn't the time or place to talk about, what I mean, with students saying create first and then think later. So yeah, it's they do. I think you're exactly right. They're looking for that magical pill, that they can take, and then they can be famous, and then they're done and they're published.
Yeah.
And like you, I love what you said. How you can't even guess as to what people are reading.
Yes.
Trends come and they go, and if you write to a trend, it's 5 years old or it's coming again, and then somebody writes something brilliant and that creates a trend, and it's.
I do have the impression that in Spain, at least, publishing houses are completely lost. They don't know what to publish. They are trying different things, different trends, and if one is by any chance is successful, then they try to copy the impact, because it's true. Once you've read a book that you like, you try to you tend to look for something similar. That is very nice, and it's very sensible for publishing houses, but not for authors, I think, because nobody wants to be a copy of anybody. We have the illusion of being unique and of being original, no? So, but there's another mistake. I don't know if here in America you can relate to this. Some of them think that the short story is a previous stage to the novel, that the real thing is novel. And what I try to explain is that it's completely different. Your focus on the story has to vary a lot, and that intensity is the key. It's not length, but how you regulate and how you make your way through the story in a way or another. I don't know how you work, but there are some ideas that clearly they will go for a short story, or even a micro short story, a flash story, flash fiction. And there are some, usually they accompany you during years or during months, that they will transform into a novel. You don't know how, but the intuition leads you to that. And that is quite difficult to explain if you are focused on the profitable, ideal, and perfect novel, no? Because then you don't follow the flow of the story. And sometimes one character can be just a hint on a short story and then take its own importance on a novel, and the other way around. And sometimes, yes, a short story is the seed for a beautiful tree that will be a novel or a short novel. Short novels in Spain, the nouvelle are not very popular. Yeah. I don't know why. It's a beautiful set, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a beautiful length, but trying to get a publisher for it is extremely difficult. Even in the States, it's a beautiful length. What is it? What they say? 15 to 35,000 words is a nice novella, and people don't pick them up. It's hard, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. When I part of a jury of short stories books, we find many novels inserted into them as a way of, misleading us and trying to get their way. But there is life beyond the novel. And I really hope that in the new way of self-publishing through the net, through internet, will encourage young or new or old, I don't care, authors to do things like that. Or, for instance, to publish essays on different topics that are not so popular, but anyway, they are interesting, no? I'm quite optimistic about that. I think that we've been guided by the demand. The demand? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now maybe we can be ruled by taste, by our interests. I don't know. I hope so.
So I have going back to the keynote speech that was for the listeners who were not there this morning.
Mm-hmm.
The main topic was facts, fiction, and myths. You said something that really struck me because it's the best description ever of what fake news is.
Oh my God!
You said
Did
fake news is the evil son of fiction. I loved it.
Yeah.
The best definition of what fake news.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm very worried about that. Not because I get across many fake news, because, well, I don't know. Either I don't discover them or I don't care that much. But about the fake news, like a general way of facing life, because many people are very vulnerable to news in general, and especially if they are aggressive or they are negative. I don't know why. Once a month I have to write an article for a magazine where I depict a good piece of news. And every month I have real problems because apart from science and sometimes psychology, I don't find news. They don't publish it. So it's very easy to scare people, and it's very easy to scare them with a good story. Remember that Orson Welles fake news about the aliens coming into Earth, no? Well, the War of the War of the Worlds. We are now living in that metaphorical nobody's land. So anyone that can explain the situation we are in gets attention. And drama is something that attracts us immediately, no matter if it's true or not. I don't think that we are ignorant people right now. I think that a lot of people read more than ever, even on a mobile, I don't care, or on any other support. I don't think that we are easier to manipulate than previous generations. If you look at the 30s in Europe, for instance, things were going really weird with propaganda and with not fake news, but definitely horrors, no? And they were hidden, or they were misled, or they were. But situation now is different because we are in the same channel. We can directly connect us as countries like this. And I think this is absolutely new in our history as human beings. Since we have a record of humanity, we could be manipulated by countries, by villages, by religions. But right now, the power that some news can acquire, they are global. And apparently, we are not that different, because fake news can affect America and Asia, that is like Mars, no? Sometimes. And they are using exactly the same devices. Fear, fantasy, and a slight relation with reality. Because a lie is, as we know, is easier to believe when it has a core of a truth. But where is truth? Where is the truth? If we are in a subjective world, if we have a vote and a voice and a unique thought granted, where is the truth? We have become weak because we have so much freedom to think that we don't know what to think. So at the same time, in an unconscious level, we are waiting for a big father or somebody that knows more, that tell us what is right and what is wrong. And that is what worries me, really, that our independence of thought is being transformed into insecurity and vulnerability. And my next novel is dealing with that. And it's making a comparison among the crisis in Spain, the big crisis that we were suffering since 2008, and the Nazi society. And it's quite scary if you read it. And if you write it,
Yes, you have to live with it every day when you're writing a novel.
Oh, yes.
It's in you. And I think that what Isabel asks leads directly into where do writers belong in this world with this fake news, with countries that we can connect immediately over the internet or a sound bite or whatever it might be. And I think what you said, that where do writers belong within your speech, you said where they always have been. And I found that really, really powerful in the sense that I think that you nailed it as, or you said it as, fake news is manipulation, and then there's fiction, and there's a difference between the two of them. And where do writers belong today?
Because if one has a right to manipulate, that is the writer. Because it's the right manipulation. Sometimes when I'm defending lies, and I will explain myself. When I'm explaining what is the difference between lying and fiction, sometimes my students don't get it very clear. It's like, no, but come on. For instance, if you're writing about the civil war in Spain, how can I deal with the limits, and until what part I can, or that point I can fictionalize, and that will be lacking. And what I say is that you can use reality as you want, as long as you don't manipulate it, as long as you don't use it, don't use it for bad purposes. Bad is a very childish word, but everybody understands it. No, that is the difference between writing for literature and writing for publicity, for instance, something that I also do, because manipulating, for instance, is the main goal of publicity, selling, convincing you that something is good for you. But literature can't do that unless the writer undergoes a really close examination, even moral examination. And by moral, I don't mean the right moral or the religious moral, no, but honesty, but sincerity, but a kind of truth that lies beneath it. And if the listener is not understanding it, I can't explain it better, because it's like an intuition. It's something that you get or you don't get. And that has nothing to do with writing better or not, using more adjectives or less. It has to do with grabbing the real thing. And sometimes the real thing, in order to be explained, in order to be exposed, has to contain a certain degree of fiction, because we understand sometimes better the symbols and the metaphors than the reality, because we're too close to it, and things that are very close to us are sometimes invisible. And I know that now it looks like we are talking more about philosophy than literature, but they are so close that sometimes they melt.
They are, and it's that the philosophy when a writer makes a contract with the reader, and the writer has to truly be invested in
the pact, the contract with the reader,
and that is so important, and especially with nonfiction, but within fiction as well, that that the writer doesn't break that contract, and it could be by manipulating history in the sense that they go out of the bounds of what actually happened, and then the reader walks away because they say, well, they broke the contract of staying within a historical novel that we were engaged in, unless they make it magical realism, and then they're on a different type of plane, right?
Or science fiction, or any,
but they have to let the reader know that. They have to say, here's the pact.
Being honest.
Yeah, here's the pact, and we're going there. And so it's big. The moral intent, the honesty, between writer and reader is huge.
Yeah, I think that nowadays many readers don't understand that pact can vary. They think that what a writer writes has to be real, the real thing, and the real thing has to be reality. But it's not true. Real is not reality, as fiction is not a lie, although sometimes can be false. But the limit, the border between false and truth is so blurry that in that space is where you find when you find your limits and when you find what you really believe in. My first novel, for instance, talks about that. Talks about what we teach the children that is good, and what they discover when they are growing up that is probably not that good. First, because our world is not the same as they are, the world that they are getting in, and sometimes because we are wrong. And that is where the friction between generations and also between mentalities occurs, when things are not that clear. I love the gray zone, and I think that literature is essentially a gray zone. And that is inconvenient, that's very uncomfortable.
Yes, it can be for a lot of readers, for a lot of people. They like their they like
Fix
the
it for me,
rules.
fix
Yeah,
it for me.
Absolutely. We just have a few minutes left. Brandon's been gave me the 5 minutes. He's really good at keeping us in line because we could talk all night. Yes. Isabel, do you have any more questions or?
Well, I am very curious about what motivated you to work for designer brands and helping them with their publicity campaigns. I've never seen, it's like,
it's quite
imagine
weird.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez,
But he did it.
He did it.
He did it. Many of them did it.
Yeah, I had never heard of that.
I really don't know, but that was his trademark,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, now that you say that, it's true. But I had never thought of it as a.
And
a
the same with Vargas Llosa, with alcohol and with pens.
Oh.
Yes, ha ha ha. I'm not the first one, but
Well, but those two are male. I've never seen a woman writer.
yes, because we have limits. And those limits are very hard to cross because we pay a high price. But I'm a brave girl. I'm a brave Basque girl. That in Spain means something. And also because, as I said, I come from music, and for a diva, it's almost compulsory to get some brands supporting you or sponsoring you. There is Rolex, for instance, and there are some associations with luxury brands usually. The higher you get, the more expensive brands that approach you. So one day I thought, okay, here I am. I'm still young. I have many things to do. I can, of course, write books for the rest of my life. That's what I want to do. But I have some time and some energy to devote to something. I'm already giving lessons and teaching. I got the experience of having a small company and then closing that small company. What can I do now? And suddenly I thought, we have a field in Spain that is very popular and very unpopular at the same time. That is fashion. Spain is the leading country with cheap design. We have Inditex. And Inditex is one of the main forces and main motors of economy. But nobody wants to recognize that they are wearing Inditex. This is so Spanish. And at the same time, we brag a lot about our food, about our wines, about a lot of things. But when it comes to reality, who is promoting that? The government or the local governments. And when they look for somebody, they look for a familiar face that is an actor. Why not a writer? And shyly, some wine companies and some different brands, they had approached me and some other writers in order to write on them. And then I said, why don't use our images? And why don't try to kill two birds with one shot? Women writers have no body. It's like a taboo. They have to pretend that they don't care about their aspect. or their bodies or their age. And that's not true. Everybody does. And also, we can present in front of, in the face of the public, something that is an evidence. Women, when they arrive to 40, when they turn 40, they disappear. I am 44. What is happening with me? I do have to disappear at a moment where writers are starting to do a career. I have 20 years over my back. And what if I try this? And I tried. And it's doing quite well. Of course, it's also getting some criticism from some people, but every time you move, you get some criticism. I don't really care. And curiously enough, a lot of people is understanding that and is finding it very refreshing. And people that think that a writer should only write, well, maybe they're right, but I'm not that kind of writer. I like to travel. I like to investigate. I like to try new things. And I love clothes. Mm-hmm. My mom used to make them. She was a seamstress. Mm-hmm. So I was growing up surrounded by clothes and fabrics and things like that. To me, it's very familiar. I show many of my emotions by the way that I dress or by the way I choose colors, like most women I know. So why don't integrate everything into something that is creative and that it's as well done as I can? And then Instagram came along. So it was like the perfect storm. Mm-hmm. And also, although I don't know if it's very well educated to talk about that, it's another source of income. And this is something that shouldn't be despised. And when we underwent such a horrible crisis as we had, a lot of writers should, they stop writing or they stop earning or doing anything because they couldn't. They couldn't get anything from their texts. We really have a problem with the copyrights in Spain, and we have a problem with selling books. So let's think in a divergent way, no? Yeah. So it started like a provocation in a way. It started also like a way of doing something different, and I really like it. I think that they can't stop me now.
Wow, yeah. You really caught my attention. Definitely.
Yeah, I didn't think that when I started to do that it would arise so much attention, but it did. Mm-hmm. Also, I think that from time to time moving the water is okay. Yeah. Just for the sake of doing it, you know? Maybe it's just a way of calling for attention to a topic or to a problem that we didn't know we had. But young poets, for instance, or young writers now, the female writers, some of them are paying a lot of attention to their physical aspect. Also because a lot of them are doing very well in Instagram and in social net, and they know that it is important. Mm-hmm. And also, well, some of the pictures that we writers published, they were so ugly that probably it's a progress. It's a good way of getting out that...
We need to move those waters a lot. Oh, yes.
But again, that is my way. I could never dream of impose anything on anybody. Curiously enough, many of my fellow writers that look at me like my... Espido things, no? Now they are asking me for advice. They are looking for advice and saying, that internet, that Instagram thing that you do, can you please? And I said, well, it's 4 years and take a lot of effort, and you have to have some sense of equilibrium and balance and beauty. It's not that easy, no? But it's fascinating. Working with images. And for instance, this book is very visual, has changed my perception of communicating a lot. because I publish, for instance, 3 different pics a day in Instagram, and that made me think and reflect a lot about what I was watching and what I wanted to share with my readers or followers, or as I said, curious people, no? So I think that as a secondary effect, as a side effect, that is improving my field of vision a lot. It started with a dress and it finished with a whole different vision of the whole world.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap up too, and I think we should wrap the entire podcast with "I'm a strong Basque woman," and and I'm serious, and they're not going to stop me now. I love it. I'm a strong Basque woman. They're not going to stop me now. It's like we should wrap the entire thing that way because I think it's a perfect exclamation point or a period on a wonderful discussion that I am so glad. Thank you, Isabel, for inviting us to talk, and thank you, Electra, for joining us, and thank you so much, Espido, for spending this hour with us.
On the contrary, thank you.
I mean, I enjoyed it so much, and I just feel appreciative. Thanks again. This is Case Johnston. This is the Literally Podcast. We're at Weber State University, and goodbye.
All right, thank you for listening to this podcast. This episode of Literally is sponsored by Lexicon and Line. Case, tell us a little something about Lexicon and Line.
Lexicon and Line, it does 3 things. They are communications consultants. They teach professional business writing and speaking courses, and they are research and data evaluation experts.
And you can find everything about Lexicon and Line at lexicononline.com. Please give them a visit, and thank you so much for sponsoring this podcast, Lexicon and Line.